August 28, 2025, at 1:14 a.m., the Norwegian Sea was black as ink when a $13 billion American supercarrier drifted forward under a moonless sky, its 5,000 sailors unaware of the threat below. 400 feet down, a Russian Yasen-class submarine crept into firing range, its bow tubes loaded, its fire control officers whispering coordinates through red-lit hallways. Caliber cruise missiles, Zircon hypersonics, enough firepower to turn the Gerald R. Ford into a burning reef within minutes. The Russian captain believed he was invisible, sliding into the carrier's shadow like a ghost with the ocean for a cloak. He didn't know every move he made had already triggered alarms. He didn't know the ocean around him was tightening. He didn't know NATO was hunting him. The hunter had walked into a trap. Would he strike first or be forced to surface in humiliation? At 3:24 a.m. on August 24th, west of the Lofoten Islands, a RAF P-8 Poseidon departed Lossiemouth on a routine sweep. Icy headwinds cut across the fuselage as the aircraft cruised high above a steel blue expanse when a faint tremor touched its acoustic processor. One single contact. Too smooth for nature. Too quiet for a whale, too deliberate for an underwater landslide. The pilot didn't see the submarine, nobody did, but every operator on board heard its heartbeat. The Poseidon banked left and dropped its first sonobuoy, then another, then two more, the pattern expanding into a lattice across the Norwegian Sea. Inside the operations bay, waterfall displays rippled green as tiny fluctuations spiked across the spectrum. Subtle, controlled, engineered. The radio officer called it in. Acoustic anomaly. Possible propulsion signature. Bearing 287. Keflavik launched its own P-8 minutes later. Avines followed. 3 aircraft. 1 suspected contact. No visuals. No confirmed ID. Only a ghost in the deep. Yet this ghost lingered exactly where a hostile submarine should be if it wanted to target the Gerald R. Ford. By dawn, analysts from RAF Lossiemouth reported the same thing. This is not geological. This is not biological. The signature was manufactured, intentional, and moving. On August 25th at 9:20 a.m., the ghost shifted southeast, slow, controlled. The Poseidons tracked its faint trail as if tracing smoke underwater. USS Bainbridge, USS Mahan, and the Norwegian frigate Thor Heyerdahl accelerated into an escort shell, their sonars powering on and pushing cone-shaped beams into the deep. P-8 rotations intensified. One plane returned to base, another immediately took its place. A 24-hour airborne dragnet. By noon, the search area was remapped. Buoy fields multiplied, each one sinking like a seed into the dark. A quiet underwater spiderweb forming layer by layer. At 11:48 a.m., a Royal Navy frigate switched to active sonar. Ping, a hammer blow through the water. At 12:06 p.m., a Norwegian frigate deployed a 2-kilometer towed array. The long tail dragged through the depths like a serpent, combing for turbulence. The Russian captain reacted fast. He dove deeper, then dipped east toward colder water pockets, attempting to merge with a thermal layer to blur his silhouette. It didn't work. The pattern of the ocean betrayed him. NATO warships adjusted course instantly. Poseidons tightened their grid. Every time he listened, he was being listened to louder. At 19:12 p.m. on August 25th, weather worsened. Wind-driven waves slammed the carrier group, but sonar conditions in the depths improved. Cold water sharpened acoustic reflections. NATO's underwater trap solidified. At 4:15 a.m. on August 26th, another faint propulsion note surfaced on the northern edge of the buoy field. Same smooth frequency, same mechanical rhythm. This time, it matched a known profile, Project 885M Yasen-class. Russia's most lethal submarine, caliber, onyx, zircon, torpedoes silent until impact. A sub built to hunt carriers and outrun the hunters. But the Yasen had picked the wrong ocean, the wrong week, the wrong victim. At 14:42 p.m. on August 26th, hunting intensified. P-8 pilots dropped their grids in perfect intervals, turning the sea into a chessboard. Destroyers fired bursts of active sonar, each pulse synchronizing with aircraft sweeps. One operator described it as a giant fist closing around a single speck of dust. By evening, NATO's picture sharpened. They had no exact location, but they had a box, an underwater cage roughly 40 nautical miles wide. And somewhere inside it, a billion-dollar predator was suffocating in silence. On August 27th at 4:11 a.m., the Yasen dipped deeper than the charts recommended. Temperatures fell, pressure climbed, hull plates groaned like old steel bending in the cold. Then the hammering began, not from depth, but from above. Active sonar struck the submarine at intervals sharp enough to feel in the crew's bones. The sound slammed the hull in metallic waves. Inside the control room, red lights flickered. Oxygen scrubbers thrummed. Condensation bled down metal seams. Nobody spoke. The crew's faces stayed locked on their consoles. Coffee cooled untouched. Every 30 seconds, another burst. Carrier-grade sonar rattling conduits. Frigate arrays bouncing signatures off the keel. A Poseidon's ping sweeping down like a blade. The Yasen wasn't being hunted anymore. It was being herded. At 4:39 a.m., a sharp ping hit the port side. The Russian sonar officer flinched. The captain clenched his jaw but said nothing. The submarine was losing the battle of patience. Above them, the USS Ford's sonar operators relayed data in rapid bursts. Hydrophone signatures, wake turbulence, displacement patterns. 2 U.S. destroyers triangulated the latest anomaly into a triangle barely 12 miles wide. The net closed. At 5:22 a.m., another Poseidon skimmed the cloud deck and dropped a fresh line of sonobuoys, each one splashing into the water in a straight pattern, an underwater fence. Green lights blinked across radar screens. One buoy twitched, detecting faint cavitation. The operator zoomed in. The noise was slight, barely noticeable, but it was consistent, steady. A submarine fighting to stay quiet, and failing. At 7:03 a.m., humidity rose inside the Yasen. The crew heard the pulses now with their bodies instead of their ears. Each one vibrated in their ribs. The captain ordered a slow turn southwest, hoping to bleed into deeper trenches. The movement revealed him. 2 buoys chirped at the same second, both on separate lines, a clear intersection. Above the waves, the P-8's acoustic operator snapped upright. Contact reacquired, bearing fixed, range narrowing. The sub's last escape route disappeared. At 8:12 a.m., NATO began the box squeeze. Destroyers shifted outward. Frigates drifted closer. Poseidons tightened their spiral. Screens across the strike group lit with converging arrows. The Yasen was trapped within a zone smaller than Manhattan, and every time it moved, the ocean betrayed it instantly. At 8:47 a.m., stress fractured discipline. A junior operator misread a depth echo. Another soldier gripped his chair until his knuckles blanched. The captain watched red dots blink across the Russian screens. Too many, everywhere. Hemmed from the west, locked from the north, shadowed from above. He whispered one word, "Davlenie," pressure. But he wasn't talking about the ocean. He was talking about NATO. At 9:42 a.m. on August 27th, the pounding intensified, not physically but psychologically. Each ping meant a ship had repositioned. Each echo meant another asset had arrived. Each tight cluster of buoys tightened the noose one more notch. The Yasen had stalked the world's most powerful carrier. It had crept in for a perfect kill. It had achieved firing range, and now it was the one being hunted, with nowhere left to run. At 10:25 a.m., the Russian Yasen-class submarine is already deep, 310 meters, running a sustained 5 knots, threading through a cold pocket to distort its thermal wake. But the ocean around it is no longer empty. The Norwegian Sea vibrates with foreign metal. A faint impulse strikes the hull, not pressure, not turbulence. A ping, single-toned, wide-band, unmistakably active. The frequency sweep is 1.2 to 2.6 kilohertz, a calibrated pulse, not random, not accidental, a message. Then, the Yasen's acoustic sensors spike. The captain freezes. The crew turns towards sonar screens that were quiet seconds ago. The return echo forms a clean arc, broad, strong, deliberate. A Virginia-class submarine just announced itself, like a lion exhaling against the neck of a deer. Almost immediately, the room darkens automatically as the subsystem flags an expose event, meaning the enemy is not searching. The enemy is declaring they already know where you are. At 10:26 a.m., the Russian captain orders a combat sprint, 20 knots. The Yasen's OK-650 kpm reactor shifts to rapid power mode, coolant flow doubling. Turbine RPM jumps to 4,800. The sub accelerates through a pressure layer to try and break the acoustic lock, but the Virginia expects this. At 10:27 a.m., sonobuoys AN/SSQ-53D IFAR begin activating in a cascading grid behind the sub. They form a tightening hexagon. NATO aircraft had already seeded the area hours before. P-8 Poseidons, Norwegian P-3 Orion Legacy Birds, and a British Merlin HM-2. The grid is live. Every move compresses the escape envelope. At 10:29 a.m., the Yasen fires 2 MG-104 decoys. Both launch cleanly, venting bubble clouds to mimic prop signatures. NATO ignores them within 0.7 seconds. Their Doppler pattern is flagged as non-threat instantly. AI-based filtering, multi-static triangulation, no confusion, no delay. The Russian crew watches their last ghosts vanish off foreign screens. At 10:32 a.m., the cage tightens. A British Type 23 frigate shifts heading 14 degrees starboard. A U.S. Arleigh Burke destroyer shifts 11 degrees port. Two vectors intersect, creating a narrowing corridor. At 310 meters, the Yasen has no diving room left. At 20 knots, it risks cavitation bloom that will mark it like a flare underwater. Above and below, NATO submarines align vertically, one deeper, one shallower, forming a pressure vise. Depth charges aren't required. Presence alone is a weapon. There is no up, no down, no out. At 10:36 a.m., the Yasen slows to 14 knots. Its wake flattens into a thin acoustic smear. The captain grips the steel edge of the navigation console. He is not angry. He is realizing the truth. This wasn't a hunt. It was an ambush. Their acoustic signature, a specific turbine micro-vibration at 43.9 hertz, was cataloged before the chase began. NATO had shadowed them for hours. They were never predators here. They were bait. At 11:10 a.m., the Virginia-class submarine sends a second active ping. Louder, sharper. Its rise time is shorter, meaning closer. The wavelength compresses the water column, making pipes inside the Yasen vibrate like tuning forks. The captain exhales once. No orders, just silence. At 11:40 a.m., a P-8 Poseidon flies overhead at 2,500 meters. Its MAD sensor, a magnetic anomaly detector, sweeps the region. The Yasen tries to mask its field with counter-rotating feed pumps, but the magnetic shadow is already logged in NATO's threat lattice. Everyone in the room knows detection is final. At 1:50 a.m. on August 28th, darkness, stillness, only the mechanical heartbeat of a trapped machine. The Yasen is boxed in 70 nautical miles north of the Lofoten Shelf. The Ford Carrier Strike Group has not deviated course by more than 2 degrees. NATO aircraft continue rotations over the grid. The Yasen floats without speaking to the ocean. At 4:15 a.m., a third ping. Short, clipped, authoritative. Even the most disciplined crew flinches. At 6:10 a.m., sunrise above the Norwegian Sea, pitch black below, and the Russian captain finally understands he's not escaping, he's surviving. At 12:31 p.m., the captain orders a retreat vector. 129 degrees southeast, 4 knots. This is not tactical repositioning. This is submission wrapped in procedure. The sub rises 40 meters to reduce metal fatigue, leveling at 270 meters. Its reactor output drops, pumps slow. Turbine hum dips below 41 hertz. Silence becomes their camouflage. At 12:40 p.m., NATO surface ships peel back. Not fleeing, not chasing, just retracting like teeth, withdrawing from the flesh of prey that no longer fights. At 12:55 p.m., a final message, unspoken yet absolute, hangs in the water. You were never invisible, you were tolerated. The Yasen leaves the cage. Its pride does not. The Ford's deck remains still, but the silence has a pulse. Between 1:31 p.m. and 3 p.m., the final 90 seconds unfold. No shots fired, no torpedoes launched, no debris, not a scratch on either vessel. But dominance was unmistakably asserted. NATO deployed hammering tactics, simultaneous pressure from above, below, and lateral vectors, designed to collapse escape geometry until the target is forced to concede space. Networked ASW discipline at its peak. The Russian sub was not damaged. It simply lost the unseen battle. Modern stealth isn't stealth once you're tracked by a network. Between 7:30 a.m. and 10 a.m., aftermath and signals. After days of pursuit, the ocean quiets again. No official statements from Washington, Brussels, or Moscow. But NATO's posture says everything. Journalists gather in Oslo. Analysts stare at static radar feeds. A British headline spreads across morning screens. New Red October, sub-hunt off Norway. Over a dozen NATO aircraft were involved. Verified by open-source flight logs. Norwegian media confirms the P-8s never left the grid. By late August 28th, whispers circulate through defense circles. The Yasen, possibly stressed or partially compromised, is heading home. Not ordered, not escorted, just leaving the theater. The Ford maintains course, calm, unbroken, a Titan gliding across the Arctic boundary. Between 10 a.m. and 12:30 p.m., strategic takeaways. When the noise fades, strategists step in. Allies admit privately. A Russian Yasen-class submarine inside lethal range of a U.S. supercarrier is a grave threat. A zircon salvo at 40 to 60 kilometers would leave the Ford no reaction window. Close-range hypersonics end narratives in seconds. The incident forces a new conclusion. The Arctic is no longer a frozen buffer. It is a choke point. The Geoc gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK, tightens again as the world warms. NATO leaders vow more sensors, more ships, more vigilance. The logic is simple. Any asset entering our backyard will be tracked by all sensor eyes. Always. Power responds to pressure with structure. Between 12:30 p.m. and 3 p.m., conclusion and final hook. The August 2025 standoff ends without a torpedo, but it remains one of the clearest demonstrations of modern deterrence. The hunter became the hunted, and the hunted was humbled by a lattice built from satellites, aircraft, drones, destroyers, submarines, and a carrier that never slowed. What began as a Russian intelligence-gathering probe turned into a silent fight for survival. In the end, both navies returned home, but one carried a message etched into steel. In the cold black beneath the Norwegian Sea, the rules change fast. Detection is death without the explosion. How close did we come? Will the next encounter end as quietly? If this breakdown gripped you, subscribe for more frontline naval encounters. The next one may not end with silence.